Afternoon, Paul. What can you tell us about the lineup and maybe quick update on Pierre-Luc Dubois and where he's at?
Yeah, so he's going to try to get him through a full practice tomorrow, and then if he feels good, then we'll consider him for the next game. I don't have him in tonight. Thompson comes in, Vesalainen comes out, and Brossoit will play goal.
We'll go next to Mike McIntyre from the Winnipeg Free Press. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Gregor. Thanks, Paul. Afternoon. You no doubt remember that game Lauren played in Vancouver. I think it was just before Christmas a couple of years ago. He was pretty fired up to play in his sort of hometown. Is that part of the mindset getting him in a game against the Canucks, or the time's just right?
Yeah, it's a timing thing. I mean, we didn't want to leave him too long because he's got to stay on a rhythm. When we get into March, we're going to need him to play a bunch of games for us. But it's also a rhythm for Connor. And I think 3 days for Connor is about perfect. But if Connor had played tonight and Lauren the next game, then we'd get a 5-day block. We'd really like where Connor's at, so we want to try to keep him in the right kind of rhythm between games.
And we'll go next to Jamie Thomas from Jets Radio. Go ahead, Jamie.
Hey, Paul, how much is the addition of Thompson going to help out on the penalty killing department, especially how much Kopp and Lowry and Lewis played on Wednesday?
With Pierre-Luc out of our lineup, Kopp and Lowry are doing double duty now. They're really the only players that do that. They're on the power play and they kill penalties. And I played Andrew Kopp for more than I'd like to last game because there was a high number of both. So in the event that we get into a high number of penalties tonight, we have backup there. But it's also another face-off man, a guy that we can use to take face-offs on the PK, which should take some pressure off both Kopp and Lowry.
We'll go next to Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Sean.
Hey, Paul, your team has clearly showed this year that when it needs to push late in games, it can and generate a lot of high scoring chances. Just talking with Josh, he says a lot of that is risk profile and activating defense. Given the success that your team has in pushing when it wants to push, does it ever make you think of upping your risk profile more regularly throughout the game? Or building that into your game plan, or is that just too much to ask of your team to play that style for that long?
I don't think anybody does, and there's a couple of factors for it. First of all, there's the right play. At every time in any situation, there's you could conceive as there's a right time for the defenseman to go down, and then there's the time where it's either too risky or the payoff for you going down isn't big. But what you need to factor in is the other team's style of play too. So you can get more aggressive down the walls, and you can push that risk profile because the other team has changed their game when they're up by a goal or two. I mean, Edmonton kept flying the zone, which was unusual. You don't see teams do that very often. But they will give you another foot of ice just to make sure that they don't get caught cheating on a puck. So it's not just a function of your team. And one of the things that we've done well in those games, and it looks like it's all us and that now we're really going, is we actually haven't changed our style of game. The other team changes and then we get more zone time. And it's also not changing our style has actually allowed the game not to go from maybe a 1-goal game to a 2-goal game to their advantage. So it wouldn't be as easy as you think just to say, hey, fellas, everybody up the ice, everybody down the boards. You get beat regularly.
And we'll go next to Kelly Moore from CJOB. Go ahead.
Hey, Paul, I asked this question with a little bit of hesitancy because Colorado and Toronto are at the bottom of the league in this stat and they're in pretty good years. But from a physical point of view, and particularly hits, can your team increase that a little bit, or because of the schedule and maybe because of the style of play, are you happy with where you are in the physicality end of things?
So it was a thing that we wanted to get better at in terms of a game 1 and game 2 against Edmonton. We felt there were more places that we could be more physical. Colorado Toronto numbers are somewhat misleading because they have the puck so much, right? Never throw a hit when you have the puck. The general answer to the answer is yes. But there are about 3 or 4 stats and that are very subjective, and hits is one of them. We came out of a game last year in the city where I walked off the bench and thought there were about 8 hits in that game, and the other team, it was at home for the other team, and they got credited, I believe, for 46. So you got to be really careful with how you perceive that stat because it's so subjective and it's so different in each building.
And final question to Ken Weeb from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Weaver.
Paul, where do you feel your team is at when it comes to building identity and game that you want it to look like on a regular?
Yeah, not that far off. There are big chunks of our game that I like quite a bit better than in years past. The offensive ideas, I think, are there. I think we're still slightly behind at times in some of our aggressiveness. It goes to the question about, D getting more involved. I think we've cautioned a little bit at times. We'd like to be able to push that a little bit, but there are big chunks to our game that I like very, very much.
Thanks very much, Coach.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. We'll be back.